What's up guys? Welcome to part 2 of my Firebird engine build. When we last left off, everything was tore down to just the block and the heads had just been rebuilt. Today we'll be reassembling the whole thing and firing it up for the very first time. So without further ado, let's get to it. First up, our new Edelbrock 3790 camshaft was installed. This cam has a duration of 263, 253 for the exhaust and intake respectively, and a lift of 0.442 for the exhaust and 0.420 for the intake. It's not a crazy cam, but when it's paired with a set of 1.6:1 rocker arms, it should make a pretty big difference. Once that was in, a new timing set was installed, which wasn't really needed, but since we had it apart this far, we figured we might as well do it. The timing chain cover was absolutely covered in grime from a leaking seal, so that got hit with engine degreaser, given a good scrub, and rinsed off. The cheap Chinese headers I bought came with this temporary black coating to prevent rusting, and I found the easiest way to get it off was to buy the cheapest carb cleaner I could find and go over it with that and a toothbrush. Once the black stuff was off, I wiped them down with rubbing alcohol just to be on the safe side, then sprayed them with Eastwood's 1400 degree high temp manifold coating. This stuff has worked great on cast iron manifolds in the past, so I'm hoping it'll work just as well on these headers. Once these were on the car, we discovered the Y-pipe was a bit too long to allow them to sit at the right angle to match the heads, so we had to shave about an inch out of the middle of the Y-pipe. Not a big deal once we put a clamp here, but it was still a little annoying. There are two O2 bungs here. One is for the ECM narrowband, and the other is for my aftermarket wideband O2 sensor. And while I unfortunately didn't get a video of it, I also had this catalytic converter delete pipe bent up. Next, we installed the heads. And then we changed the fuel pump. And I don't want to see a single comment down below about how I went about doing this. The stock fuel pump still worked, but it was only outputting about 38 psi, and this car is destined for bigger injectors, so it needed to be replaced. I chose a Walbro 255 LPH, and while we were installing it, we redid the rusty fuel lines with AN fittings, stainless steel braided, and stainless hardline tubing. If you're wondering, the third stainless line you see is the brake line we redid last year. Once we finished the fuel pump replacement, we resealed the access hatch we made. I'm going to save all of the ECM mods and tuning equipment for another tuning-focused video, but for now I mounted a vacuum boost gauge and wideband O2 gauge on the A-pillar. Autolite makes the pod out of the cheapest thin plastic you could imagine, and it still costs $50. But unfortunately, they're the only ones who make a gauge pod for this car, so I didn't have much of a choice. The one thing I will say for it though is that the fitment is excellent. I attached it with this 3M VBH tape for a bit of a cleaner look, so we'll see how well that holds up. We installed the 1.6:1 roller tip rocker arms and set preload on the lifters. Then we reinstalled the intake manifold, the intake plenums, which I despise because of how difficult they make to get to things, and finally, for now, the factory fuel injectors. All that was left to do was set the timing, and by the sound of it, maybe tighten up the lifters a little. Then we had a bit of a catastrophe. Unfortunately, it wasn't on video because I intended to just enjoy the moment that a month's worth of work had been leading up to and shoot the clips I needed for this video later. But I digress. After setting the timing, we proceeded to break in the camshaft. This involves revving the engine to a little over 2000 RPM and holding it there for about 15 minutes. During this, we were closely monitoring everything but the temperature gauge. Forgot to look at that until smoke started coming out of the PCV breather, at which point the gauge was pegged at 250 degrees. From cold start to shutdown, it was only running for about 6 minutes in total, but after doing a compression check on all cylinders, 2 are where they're supposed to be at 160 psi, 2 are around 140 psi, and the last 2 are at 100 psi. At the very least, the rings have lost their temper. Worst case scenario is I'll have to have the block punched 30 over and completely rebuilt now. We did have coolant in the car, but apparently there was an air bubble somewhere in the system that we missed, and that kept coolant from circulating. So that means I get to tear the whole engine apart again, and this time the block needs to be pulled. And I can't really do that right now. This is, or was, my daily driver, and I put a lot of things in my life on hold to work on it for 1 month straight. For an entire month of my life, it was literally get up, go to work, come home, work on car, go to bed. And I am exhausted. So the car is going to get pushed into the barn, where it will sit over winter until next spring when I have built back up the reserve of patience needed to complete the project. But I still need something to drive. So I went out and bought a cheap beater car for about $3,000 that is very reliable and just needs new tires. When I say cheap beater car, this lovely little 72 Valiant with 98,000 original miles probably isn't what came to mind, but it was a right place, right time kind of thing. It will remain completely stock and haul me around just fine until the Firebird is ready to go. This is not the outcome I had hoped for, but the Firebird will be finished in a future video. Until then, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, hit like, get subscribed, and ring the bell so you get notified when I post new videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.